Hey everybody. So a swing and a miss for Kari Lake. Before I get into what actually just happened, I just want to basically set the stage here. Kari Lake has made herself the world's most obvious, egregious, obsequious supplicant for Donald Trump. Basically, there is a picture that exists of Kari Lake vacuuming a carpet in preparation for Donald Trump's arrival, all ostensibly in anticipation of a moment where the favor could be returned for all of her groveling and kowtowing and her being a sycophant to Donald Trump. This right now is the moment where she would expect some type of reciprocation from Donald Trump, some type of other end of the transactional relationship. And yet here, where Donald Trump had the ability or the opportunity rather to name Kari Lake to some type of position, there was a lot of reporting suggesting that Kari Lake would be best suited or most expected to be put in a position where she could be ambassador to Mexico. And I guess that's a good opportunity to introduce this post from Donald Trump. The post says, "I am pleased to nominate Ron Johnson," this is not the U.S. Senator, this is somebody else, "to serve as the United States Ambassador to Mexico. Ron will work closely with our great Secretary of State nominee Marco Rubio to promote our nation's security and prosperity through strong America First foreign policies. During my first term, Ron served as the ambassador to El Salvador, where he worked tirelessly with Salvadoran authorities and our team to reduce violent crime and illegal immigration, blah, blah, blah." This was expected to be the post that Kari Lake was going to be named to. This would have been the moment where all of that groveling would actually pay off for Kari Lake, and yet instead of getting some payoff here, instead she got summarily discarded. And so not only is she not the governor of the state of Arizona because she lost that race, not only is she not the senator for the state of Arizona because she lost that race, but even in the role that she was expected to take in the Trump administration, she didn't even get that. If you are too undesirable to be part of an administration that was initially going to include Matt Gaetz, an administration that includes Kimberly Guilfoyle, an administration that includes Pete Hegseth and RFK Jr., if Kari Lake is too much of a crackpot to be palatable to Donald Trump, that doesn't exactly reflect too well on somebody like Kari Lake. So another blow for Kari Lake, who has dedicated her life to trying to get some position in government, and yet in election cycle after election cycle, opportunity after opportunity, She cannot catch a break. That is how undesirable she is, not only to just her constituents, the people of Arizona, but also to somebody like Donald Trump. Again, somebody who thought that RFK Jr. was an adequate pick to lead the nation's health infrastructure. And yet Kari Lake couldn't get an ambassadorship to Mexico, which, by the way, is not to say, I may very well be eating my words because she may get an ambassador position later on, but this is the role that she was expected to take, and this is also the role that she is now certainly not going to get because, again, Donald Trump has named Ron Johnson. For those who are just joining, it is a different Ron Johnson, not the senator. We should be so lucky to get Ron Johnson out of that Senate seat. But that'll actually be a big pickup opportunity when that seat comes up for re-election, I believe 4 years from now, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm being asked right now, how is Kari Lake supposed to continue her lawsuit for the 2022 Arizona gubernatorial race and her inevitable lawsuit for the 2024 Arizona Senate race? Well, that's the good news in all of this. Now that she's not going to be an ambassador to Mexico, she's going to have plenty of time to take care of her other responsibilities, which are shadow governor and shadow senator from the state of Arizona. I mean, like, again, there's very little I'll ever compliment Donald Trump on, but recognizing that Kari Lake was perhaps a little bit too toxic to put in any administration is one small mark in his favor. So, and that'll be the only marks in his favor that I think are worth talking about. But man, a poor reflection on somebody like Kari Lake. So with that said, let's take the opportunity while I have you, just to answer some questions that you have. So throw some questions in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them, and we'll do a little bit of a less formal meeting now that we have the opportunity to do this live stream here. My favorite image of Kari Lake is when she wouldn't get off the stage. The Chiron was telling her Trump was waiting, and she kept talking and talking. Here's the thing about that moment. At least she had the foresight to know that her 15 minutes was up and that she might as well wring every drop out of that wet towel. Like, just make sure she gets every last second of that 15 minutes, because clearly that's not going to continue here. And there is a small part of me that thinks that maybe the reason Trump was, I guess, had the foresight not to nominate her to any position in his administration is this woman is so aggressively desperate for attention that for somebody like Trump, who wants to be the center of attention, who wants the show to be all about him, I think even he recognized that having Kari Lake was a liability, because there is nobody that Kari Lake is more, very much like Trump. I mean, she went to the Donald Trump School of Politics. There is nobody that Kari Lake wants to promote more than Kari Lake herself. Now, all the groveling to Donald Trump was in service of her own hopeful ascent in politics. Let's be clear. Kari Lake and people like Kari Lake were not doing this, did not get into politics out of some desire to certainly help their constituents. And what she would say about Donald Trump is not out of some deep-seated, principled loyalty to the guy. She did it because she viewed him rightly as a vehicle for her own ascent to power within the Republican Party. I mean, she did it more obviously than a lot of other members of the GOP, but that is the way to succeed in today's Republican Party. And to the opposite point, a way to kill your political aspirations in today's Republican Party is to make yourself an opponent of the guy. I mean, I think there's one member of the House in the Republican Party that voted either in favor of impeachment or the January 6th committee. But in any case, she just saw the writing on the wall, and it's not difficult to see. I mean, all of these people know exactly what they're doing. None of them are every single member of his cabinet basically has already been out saying what they really thought about Donald Trump back when it didn't matter. I mean, his own vice presidential running mate called him America's Hitler. So we don't have to pretend here that any of these people actually like the guy. They just know the value in aligning themselves with him. So, I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's really what this comes down to. Kari Lake should have never quit her day job. That's actually couldn't get more true than that. I mean, at least she was able to get on TV. You know, she I guess was hoping that she could trade that in for a position of power. But you know, which is not to say, by the way, that she's not going to end up on Newsmax or OAN 5 minutes from now. I'm sure everybody here saw that Matt Gaetz is now going to be on OAN. I think let's pull up this. Let's see. We'll start right here. Here's the. Let's see. Do we have the image? Here we go. Oh, here we go.
The best reporting, the best. I could not be more excited to join the One America News family. The best reporting, the best analysis, and the most in-depth coverage of the Trump administration is going to come from our team. I've got the sources, I've got the insights, and there is such a spirit of optimism to unlock the opportunity of America. There's no place that's going to cover it better than One America News. And I would suggest, if you're not in a place where you can access One America News on your normal television station, go get our app. Go get our One America News app. That's where you can watch my show at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. Dan's going to be a great partner. We're going to have a lot of collaborations together, and we're going to have the must-see information so that you know what's going on with President Trump, with Congress, all around the country.
Looking for
must-see information. Go get your must-see information from Matt Gaetz. I wonder if the first thing that he's going to cover in terms of must-see information is going to be what the House Ethics Committee report said. But I mean, this is what happens in today's Republican Party. So maybe there is a TV slot for Kari Lake at some point in the near future. By the way, I should note for everybody that I do have a Discord set up, so if anybody is looking to join Discord, I'm going to pin the link to it in the comments right now, as soon as I remember how to do it. So let's... Oh boy. All right, this is me trying to figure out how to get my Discord link. Okay, maybe we'll do this. Maybe we'll do this at another point. Oh, here we go. All right, I'm going to drop the link right here in the chat. If anybody is interested in joining my Discord. There we go. Okay. So let's get back to some questions here. How long do I think that until the Musk-Trump relationship crashes and burns? To the same point that I really do believe that Trump probably viewed a potential Kari Lake ambassadorship as a bad strategic move because of the prospect of Kari Lake just being interminably thirsty for attention. I think that there is a risk that the same thing will happen with Elon Musk, especially as Musk continues to want to take such a forward-facing role in all of this. And the notion that there's not going to be some fallout, that's the thing. The only thing worse for all of these Republicans than seeing the fact that Donald Trump eventually throws everybody under the bus, the only thing worse than that are these Republicans seeing it and then thinking that they're special, that it's not going to happen to them, that they're somehow different. I mean, even the people who align themselves most closely with Donald Trump in the end, like you have somebody like Ronna McDaniel, somebody who took the name Romney out of her own last name because she was just that committed to the bit of aligning herself with Trump, and Trump didn't like her uncle, Mitt Romney, and so she did him the solid of literally changing her name in deference to Trump. And in the 2022 midterms, after Republicans got beat pretty badly in what was supposed to be a red wave year, he needed somebody to take the blame, even though the vast majority of candidates who lost were the ones who aligned themselves with him and his MAGA agenda. I'm talking Dr. Oz, Kari Lake, Herschel Walker, Doug Mastriano, Don Bolduc. So it was actually the either the normal Republicans, or I say that with very generously, the quote unquote normal Republicans, or more moderate Republicans than these outright MAGA Republicans who overperformed in the 2022 election. But still, Donald Trump needed somebody to blame. He couldn't accept any of the blame himself, so he had to pin it on Ronna McDaniel, and so he fired her as RNC chair, even though, look, I'm not here to run cover to carry water for Ronna McDaniel, but the reason that those Republicans lost was not because of Ronna McDaniel. The reason those Republicans lost in 2022 is because they aligned themselves with Donald Trump. It is the Trump brand of politics, which is not to say that it doesn't work just fine for Trump himself, because clearly it does. But the ability of these non-Trump Republicans who are cosplaying as Donald Trump himself to replicate what he does, there are obviously limits to that. And again, we saw that with Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, Doug Mastriano, Kari Lake, Don Bolduc. All of those people had a lot of trouble convincing their states to vote for them. Meanwhile, I'm sure a lot of people who voted against them would ultimately vote for Trump in the end, but that's not to say that this strategy is not difficult to replicate, because clearly it was. But either way, he needed somebody to blame, blamed it on Ronna McDaniel. She got fired as RNC chair. So if he's willing to throw somebody under the bus who was so blindly and aggressively deferential to him that she literally changed her name to more closely comport to what he wanted to see, then he's going to do it to everybody. Nobody is safe. He fired George Papadopoulos. He fired Gordon Sondland. All of those people got called low-level volunteers, coffee boys. Everybody was fired via tweet. So, the notion that it's not eventually going to happen to Elon Musk is so devoid of logic and ignores the reality of what's happened to literally everybody who Donald Trump has surrounded himself with, except for Stephen Miller, maybe. So, he's attacked Kayleigh McEnany because she said something that he didn't agree with and publicly attacked her on Truth Social. Nobody is safe. He has no allegiance to anybody but himself. That's it. Why did the GOP choose Trump as their cult leader? I think it's that the answer to that question is because he was shameless enough to do whatever, to drop any pretense that any of these people felt like they had to abide by, and just be exactly who Republicans were behind closed doors. Republicans had this facade that they abided by, where they pretended they were the party of family values, they pretended that they were the party of fiscal responsibility, they pretended they were the party of the Constitution, of law and order, of states' rights. They weren't, but those were just shiny bumper stickers. But Trump allowed them to just be who they actually were, which is a party that is focused on deporting all people who aren't white from this country. They are focused on not being fiscally responsible, but rather just cutting taxes for the ultra wealthy, even though that's going to kill the deficit and it's going to balloon the deficit in this country. And so he just presented himself as the one thing that Republicans were, I guess, too cowardly to just come out and say. Okay, moving on. I apologize if you've already touched on it. What's your take on the United CEO's assassination as a whole? So, look, I'm not going to sit here and applaud vigilante justice, but I think it would be silly, and the reason why is because for everybody who applauds, vigilante justice when it happens to a pharmaceutical company CEO, there are just as many people out there who would be just as willing, who think it's just as justifiable to do the same thing against an abortion rights group CEO or something like that. So that isn't, it's the last thing I want to do is say is justify it for one side until it comes back and bites everybody in the ass on the other side. But I think the pain behind why, I think the rationale for why there are so many people who do applaud it is very real. Look, there is a reason that even though it's not been a question of something that we were willing to do for the last 4 years. I mean, there is a reason why I have been and continue to advocate for Medicare for all. I think the notion that we have worse health outcomes in this country, higher infant mortality, higher maternal mortality. We spend, I think, the most per capita on healthcare in the industrialized world, and have what to show for it? Lower. We have lower life expectancy than even our closest neighbor in Canada. Like, our healthcare system is the envy of nobody in this world. And if it was, think about it this way. America exports every aspect of our culture and our technology and, everything we have across the world. The whole world is looking to import what America has to offer. There is a reason that nobody is looking to import what we do in the realm of healthcare. If they were, that you can go to the farthest corners of God's green earth and find a Yankees hat. And so if they thought that our healthcare system was in any way on any planet the envy of anybody, or in any way something to replicate, something to be jealous of, they'd have done it. They import everything else. Culture, movies, music, television, technology. But nobody wants to touch our healthcare system. There's a reason for that. It is the joke of the world. It is the perhaps one of, if not the most predatory systems that we have on the planet, in our entire economy, for sure. And so, of course, 1 in 7 claims for Americans are denied from healthcare companies. So, of course, people are angry. Of course, there are people applauding this. Look, it would be irresponsible of me to do the same, but I'm not going to ignore the reason, the root cause for why so many people feel the way that they do about healthcare companies. Insurance companies as a whole. And so, that's my thought on that. And yeah, I'm getting the comment. That's why medical tourism is popular. I mean, like, the notion that in America, where you can get anything, where the whole world comes here for whatever it is that they need. Like, the whole world, if you want some of the best food in the world, we've got it in the United States. If you want the best tourism in the world, if you want the best sightseeing in the world, if you want the best shopping in the world, like, there is something for everybody here. And yet Americans are exporting themselves to other countries, to Turkey, to Mexico, for medical tourism because nobody can afford healthcare. I know people that have gone to Mexico so that they can get basic dental procedures. It's not all like hair implants and hair implants and other implants from Turkey. Like, there are regular people who are getting regular medical procedures just by virtue of the fact that it is cheaper to afford a plane ticket, a hotel, and a 3-day stay somewhere along with the procedure itself than it is to just go to the doctor down the street. So, I don't think I'm saying anything that everybody isn't already acutely aware of in this country. Yeah, so I think that's a lot of the rationale behind what we saw. Okay, what are my thoughts on Clyburn calling for Trump to be pardoned? This is a great question. I think, let me think of the most diplomatic way to put this. I think it is absolute cowardly horseshit. The notion that here's the thing. Why is it that Democrats always have to be the adults in the room? That Republicans can commit crimes not only with impunity, but the whole ecosystem will rally around them to pretend that, in fact, a blatant crime somehow wasn't a crime at all or is the fault of the Democrats. And yet it's just the onus is on the left to always be the adults in the room, to always say, okay, well, this guy committed crimes. This guy committed 34 felonies in New York. This guy tried to steal classified documents from the White House and bring them to his golf club or resort in Florida. This guy called the Georgia Secretary of State to let him know that he wanted to pressure him to find 11,780 non-existent votes and literally flip the election results so that they could anoint the loser of the election the winner. This guy who incited an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol and tried to block certification of a free and fair election in stark opposition to the U.S. Constitution. That guy does all that, but the onus is on the Democrats now to go ahead and pardon him for unity. Like, where are the Republicans not doing these things if they actually want to foster unity? It's always on the Democrats to step in, be the adults in the room, excuse the crimes that Republicans have committed, and so that way we can move forward. What about if we want to move forward, Republicans stop committing criminal activity for once? It always has to land on the lap of the Democrats to be the adults in the room and say, okay, well, if we want to come together as a country, we're the ones that have to go ahead and pardon a criminal. Point me to one instance where somebody has said, hey, maybe we should take some responsibility on the right for what we're doing if we want some semblance of unity. Where was anybody on the right saying, hey, if we want some unity, maybe stop lying to the American people for 4 years about there being fraud in an election where in more than 60 cases that they brought forward, not a single judge said that there was fraud. Not even a single lawyer for the Trump team tried to argue that there was fraud. Rudy Giuliani was asked in court in one of his cases, are you trying to allege fraud in this case? And even Rudy Giuliani said, no, there's no basis to allege fraud. And yet no Republicans came forward and said, hey, for the sake of unity, why don't we stop this charade? Why don't we cut the bullshit? Why don't we do what we have to do, tell the truth and bring the country together? Nobody said a single word. But the second that the Democrats have a spotlight on them, we have somebody like James Clyburn who comes forward and says, for the sake of unity, I think it's the onus is on the Democrats to excuse the criminal behavior of Donald Trump and pardon him so that he can't be held accountable. Look, he's already gotten away with it. He's not going to be tried any longer in Washington, D.C. He's not going to be tried in South Florida. He's not going to be sentenced in New York, and I would fall over myself shocked if we saw any progress in the Georgia RICO prosecution, even after he leaves office in 4 years, should we be so lucky. But still, somehow, Democrats will find a way to put the onus on themselves to further excuse his behavior. How about for the sake of unity, we actually protect the rule of law for once? Wouldn't that be nice? What about for the sake of unity, we stop pretending that a criminal committing criminal acts is somehow excusable and putting one person above the law? Why don't we just defer to the very Constitution that all of these people swear an oath to uphold and protect? But we never do that. It's always calling on the Democrats to take the high road and lay down our arms and just cower at the feet of somebody like Donald Trump, who, by the way, himself will never reciprocate. But that's what Democrats do. Democrats will consistently and constantly confer goodwill over to Republicans with this elusive hope that it'll be reciprocated. And it's never reciprocated. It happens all the fucking time. Think about what Democrats did with Merrick Garland at the DOJ. Merrick Garland didn't prosecute Donald Trump for what he did in D.C. or Florida for almost 2 years. 2 years he let him walk free and didn't bother lifting a finger because he was just that concerned about the optics of politicization. Until finally, I believe it was in November of 2022, if I'm not mistaken, he finally deigned to appoint Jack Smith as special prosecutor. But then we're, a year and a half away from the election? That's not enough time to bring these prosecutions to fruition, obviously, as we've seen at this point here, where nothing actually made it to court. And so, but Democrats will consistently do this. It's like Lucy pulling away the football from Charlie Brown every single time. We constantly think that if we just give enough goodwill to Republicans, that we can foster in some elusive bygone era of bipartisanship that just somehow, shockingly to these Democrats, never manages to materialize. But still we try, still we confer more goodwill, still we compromise, still we name, the infrastructure bill, we name it the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we name frame the gun safety bill, the bipartisan gun safety bill. We give all of this goodwill to Republicans and we never get anything back. If you were wondering why, what I'm focused on moving forward and what I think all Democrats should focus on moving forward is a commitment to actually fighting and not preserving the asymmetry that we're stuck in right now. This is why. It's because it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be a Democrat and not watch our elected officials who, again, swear an oath to the Constitution, actually be willing to defend it, to fight. I'm sick of Democrats who are constantly not willing to fight, constantly not willing to stand up, constantly saying, okay, what ways can we compromise with our friends on the other side of the aisle? And then when it comes time for their friends on the other side of the aisle to compromise with them, never happens. Never happens. We have the Mitch McConnell standard of not letting Barack Obama name Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court because, well, we couldn't possibly do that. There's a year to go until the election. But when Amy Coney Barrett has to be nominated and votes are already being cast, that's totally fine. There wasn't a single Republican who stood up and took issue with that. None of those friends on the other side of the aisle stood up and said, hey, maybe we're setting a bad precedent. But give the Democrats the opportunity to do that, and they'll take it with no questions asked. So, look, one silver lining to all of this is that we are seeing a new generation of Democrats take control here. We've watched Jerry Nadler step down as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee and Jamie Raskin take that seat. Jamie Raskin is a fighter. There is no greater fighter in the House of Representatives than Congressman Raskin. Jamie's vacancy in oversight, because he's going to judiciary, left the opportunity for AOC to become the ranking member for that committee. Again, a great fighter and a great communicator and somebody who is not going to kowtow to the right, and certainly not somebody who's going to be more focused on compromise than she is standing up for democratic values. So there are some silver linings here in terms of, I think, what the Democrats are willing to stomach anymore in light of what has been a long time of just capitulation, weakness, and spinelessness in the face of Republicans really running roughshod over our democracy and over the very ideals of bipartisanship that Democrats are trying to foster. It was never reciprocated, and the fact is that Democrats never would learn that lesson, and I hope we're finally learning that lesson right now. Am I going to host a debate for the DNC chair candidates? I'm working on that. I'm working on that right now. Full disclosure, I have no idea if it's going to work. This is all kind of uncharted territory, so I don't know if the DNC chair candidates are going to go for it. The DNC hasn't exactly been a speedboat. It's been more of a cruise ship in terms of how nimble it is. So we'll see if they're actually willing to embrace independent media and kind of give independent media figures like myself the ability to have more influence here. I hope they will, but I can assure you that I am working on it right now, and I hope to have an answer on whether I'm going to do that hopefully within a week, but we'll see. Do I think that Democrats should be more confrontational to mainstream interviewers regarding the disparity of how they're treated versus Republicans? Like, cut back the civility a bit? Yes, absolutely. And in fact, it's not just cutting back the civility. Democrats need to learn to talk to people like human beings talk to people. I think, look, there is being an elected official in a big tent party is a blessing and a curse. The reason is because, we obviously, if you value a diverse, pluralistic society, this is, there are lots of opportunities in the Democratic Party to be able to do that. But on the flip side, when you have so many different groups, I think Democrats have gotten caught up in trying not to say something that's going to run afoul of some group within this big tent, and there are a lot of groups, and you have to be careful with what you say. I think that that pendulum should and will swing back in the other direction in terms of making sure that your language is so 100% safe and non-offensive to everyone that you lose the ability to actually sound like a human being. That's my beef with Democratic elected officials. My beef with Democratic audiences is that I think that we all have to be more tolerant of people making mistakes. I know that when I post a YouTube video, for example, and if I use a saying or cite something that upsets somebody, which doesn't happen often, but it happens, I get emails about it, and people scold me about it, and like, it is okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay that you don't agree with something. I sit here and I watch Fox News all day to figure out like what clips I should cover. I sit and read news sources from the right. I listen, I debate on Piers Morgan's show with people who I think are absolutely depraved. But it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to hear something that you don't agree with. It's okay to be offended. I think that we all have to get better as a movement to give space to our elected officials to be able to say things that may otherwise get somebody in trouble. It's okay. If to police everybody's language to the point where everyone's afraid to sound like a human is not going to help us in terms of expanding our tent. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what politics is about. We need to build a coalition that is big enough that we can actually be in the majority. Otherwise, we can be perfectly safe. We can have completely uncontroversial, inoffensive language. We can say everything that's completely safe and perfect, and we can do that from the minority. But I would rather be able to actually wield some degree of power from the majority, even if it's with people in office who I agree with, not 100% of the time, maybe 75% of the time, but from the majority. I would much rather do that than having a party that is 100% safe, and I agree with every single word out of their mouths 100% of the time from the minority. It is more important to actually wield power than it is just to occupy this spot of moral superiority from deep in the depths of the minority where we can't actually wield power. So that's just my thoughts on the matter of how Democrats, I think, should alter some of their messaging to reach people who, let's be honest, this is we're in the podcast era right now. Look at the people who make the biggest difference in this election cycle. Everybody was talking about Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is not doing his show in such a way that he's afraid to offend people. Shane Gillis is not talking in a way that he's afraid to offend people. Theo Von is not doing his show in a way that he's afraid to offend people. Alex Cooper is not doing her show in a way that she's not afraid to offend people, which is not to say that you try to offend people. I'm just saying that you have to speak in a way that's authentic, and sometimes you will say something that's going to make somebody uncomfortable, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Like, I get in these spaces all the time, and I debate with people all the time, and it is uncomfortable. And sometimes I lose debates, and sometimes I get embarrassed in debates, and that's okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to be insulted. God knows, if you looked at my Twitter replies on a daily basis, you know that you have to be comfortable getting insulted. But I think that is just a small piece, but I think more broadly, the point I'm trying to convey is that we just have to be able to speak in a way that's authentic without being afraid of saying one syllable left of center that might make somebody upset, because then you lose your ability to actually resonate with normal people and sound like a human being. This is a good point. Okay, Rogan, Vaughn, and Gillis are trying to offend people. Like that, I understand that. Like, I understand if you're trying to offend people, that's one thing. So maybe that wasn't the right choice. But I think you get the broader point that I'm trying to make, which is that it is okay if inadvertently that people get offended because of some word that leaves your lips that might make somebody mildly uncomfortable. I'm just saying that we shouldn't sacrifice our ability to sound human and relatable in deference to language, to adopting language that is 100% safe, 100% inoffensive, 100% uncontroversial. That's all I'm trying to say. How do we get people to understand that every word out of Donald Trump's mouth is a lie? He'll be confronted with the truth and bald-faced lie directly to the fact-checker's face, and it never matters. Well, I think we have an obligation on the left to keep up the fight, first of all, to not give up just because it feels like he gets away with everything. And trust me, I get it. I get the sense of despair over the fact that like messaging might feel futile. A couple things about that. First of all, it's not futile, and Donald Trump won the election by a margin of 1.5%. It was the fifth smallest popular vote margin in the last century. So the difference between a Trump win and a Harris win was about 230,000 votes in 3 states. So we can disabuse ourselves of the notion that this was some massive, historic, unprecedented landslide for Democrats, and that for Republicans, and that Democrats just have to throw the whole thing away and start from scratch. So that's the first thing. Let me just fix this real quick. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say, and the reason I'm saying that is because I want to make sure that people know that it's still worth it to do the work. Like, Democrats still brought out 74 million people in this election cycle. There are still half the country is still on our side. So that we still have to do the work. We still have, and we were able to persuade a lot of people in this election cycle, and we'll continue to do the work to make sure that people know the truth. I think that our responsibility moving forward is to be very deliberate about the battles that we pick. And there's going to be a lot of shit that goes on in the Trump era where it feels like we have to focus on everything, where it feels like we have to cover every single day as a 5-alarm fire. And a lot of that's going to be justifiable. But some of the things that happen, we're going to have to pick our battles, and because we're going to have to know that if everything feels like a 5-alarm fire, then nothing is going to feel like a 5-alarm fire. And we want to make sure, especially in a second Trump term, where we're not going to have inherently the same type of resistance style energy that we had in the first Trump term. There is no, millions and millions and millions of people taking the streets to do a women's march. That the energy has shifted from where it was in the first Trump term. And so we have an obligation as messengers, and as you all watching right now who are tribunes for that message. You'll hear messages from folks in the media, and bring those messages to your circles of people. We all have an obligation to make sure that we focus on stuff that is not noise, not empty calories, not the popcorn, and B, that actually does resonate with people. And so I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that as it relates to like Pete Hegseth, and something happened about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, where a lot of people were talking about the origins of Pete Hegseth's tattoo. And I was thinking to myself, like, this is a distraction. This is what Democrats get ourselves into, because if you're really looking to persuade people, saying that Pete Hegseth's tattoo is like, I don't remember what they said, that it's like some white supremacist something or has Nazi origins. I'm not sure what it was, but like telling people that Pete Hegseth is a Nazi because of his tattoo doesn't feel like something that's truly going to be persuasive for somebody who may have voted for Trump or who's a low information political observer. I feel like there are ways to oppose Pete Hegseth's nomination that are way more persuasive, like the fact that he was never able to oversee any entity or organization. Even I think he ran like a charity that he couldn't even oversee, and yet we expect him to run an agency of 1.3 million active duty troops, and the Pentagon. And I think that's a more persuasive argument than yelling about the origins of his tattoo. And I think sometimes we have to be willing to forego what seems really shiny or sexy as far as a news story is concerned, and focus on something that may actually be more persuasive for people if we're trying to persuade. And I think that's just going to be I think that's just going to be something that we have to think about moving forward in terms of like what we cover, what we focus on, and who we want the audience to be. Obviously, there's a core of Democratic voters out there and Democratic base voters out there, or audience members out there for whom Pete Hegseth is already disqualified by virtue of everything that he does. But then there are people out there who we're trying to persuade. And I feel like if that's the audience, if we're doing the work of persuasion, which starts now and is going to last until, November 3rd or 4th or 5th or 6th in 2026 for midterms, like if that's our next project, that's the next thing we have to focus on, then I think we have to allow ourselves to be more disciplined about the stuff that we focus on, and the stuff that's going to be more resonant to the people that we're actually trying to reach. Like everybody in the Democratic base already knows that Donald Trump is disqualified, and his behavior is disqualifying, and the people he surrounds himself with are disqualifying. So we don't have to persuade those people. So let's all come together and figure out how to best persuade, best message to reach the people on the outskirts, the people that we have to bring into the coalition. Because yesterday, like starting from November 7th of this year begins the work of persuasion and expanding our tent. And we have a lot of work to do. And we've lost people in every demographic group, and we've lost people, male, female, brown, white, black. Like we have a lot of work to do with everybody. And so I think every day we have to make deliberate decisions in terms of what is going to be most effective, and what's most effective isn't going to be what's shiniest every single time. So, I'm gonna do my coverage in terms of what I think is going to be the most helpful at reaching those people. If you follow my YouTube channel and you watch my videos, I've covered the issue of tariffs a lot, and other things I don't really cover. But I think that tariffs are going to be important because Donald Trump is setting the stage for a situation where prices rise across the country, and that's going to be a focus for me, is holding him to account for the promises that he made. He swept into office under this, guise of lowering prices. So I intend to hold him to account for that. And if the first thing he does is launch a trade war with Mexico and Canada and send prices of aluminum and pharmaceuticals and building supplies and steel and everything under the sun, appliances and car parts and tractors and everything under the sun, if he sends the prices skyrocketing, that's something that I think will be resonant with the American people. Certainly more resonant than yelling about Pete Hegseth's tattoo and saying that he is a closet white supremacist because of the ink on his body. So, which may very well be true, and for folks watching, that unto itself may be important and disqualifying. But I think that we have to be strategic about the people that aren't yet in our coalition and the messages that are going to be resonant with those people. Are there any Senate or House elections in the next 2 years that are important? So there is an election coming up in April of 2025 for Wisconsin's state Supreme Court. Monumentally important. I'm going to be covering that ad nauseum on my channel. And a lot of these elections that are coming up immediately, like we're going to see elections happening in 2025 in Virginia and New Jersey. I think the New Jersey gubernatorial race is going to be happening in 2025. The state legislature in Virginia, and if I'm not mistaken, we're going to see a gubernatorial race in Virginia. But let me just confirm that right now. Yes, that's 2025 as well, November 4th. So those races are the ones coming up, and I'm going to be especially focused on them, not just because those are, our opportunities to actually make sure that we exercise some power, but it's also going to serve as a bellwether for what's to come in 2026. Remember, in 2017, we won a lot of the special elections, a lot of these bellwether elections, these off-year elections, and it served as a bellwether, a precursor for what was to come in 2018, where Democrats had the biggest margin in midterms in the House in modern American history. I think we took 41 seats in those midterm elections. So that's a good opportunity to set the stage and to put Trump on notice and the Republican Party on notice that we are not checked out, and that we're going to stay activated and engaged, and that we haven't forgotten how to vote. Have I been on Fox News? I think he would do well. No, I've never been on Fox News. I highly doubt. I would be willing to bet damn near anything that Fox would have no interest in having me on. I would be happy to do it. I'm going to be on News Nation with, I think, on Chris Cuomo's show a week from yesterday. So next Monday, I'll be on Chris Cuomo's show, and that's an opportunity to reach a center-right audience. And so, look, I've changed my view on all of this, on the idea of not platforming or validating the platforms of those on the right or center right. My view used to be, okay, don't go on these shows, don't show these shows, don't platform these people, because we don't want to give them any attention. We don't want them to benefit from our platforms on the left. But the reality is that the right not only has a platform that's perfectly validated, they have platforms that are bigger than those on the left. And so there's no danger for platforming Fox News. Fox News is fine. Fox News doesn't gain any undue advantage by virtue of getting attention on the left. Donald Trump doesn't gain any advantage. He's got 100% name ID. Fox News has 100% brand recognition. All of these people do really well, and they don't really derive much of a benefit from being on there. What they stand to lose when people like Pete Buttigieg go on, for example, is or when Gavin Newsom went on and did that debate with Ron DeSantis on Fox News, what they stand to lose is some of that insulation that their right-wing media bubble affords them. That's very rarely pierced. But I think that, look, I will advocate. I've dedicated my life to advocating for a progressive agenda. And I think that, and I know that the vast majority of Americans agree with us on climate, on reproductive rights, on healthcare, on gun safety. Like the issues go on unions, on a living wage, so on and on and on. And I think that what we're missing is just messengers who are effective enough to go on those platforms and make a case to those people who are subjected to right-wing propaganda with no pushback on a daily basis. So I'm perfectly content to go on, Chris Cuomo's show. I'd be happy to go on Fox if they would have me. That's why I go on Piers Morgan's show probably every other week, and I'll continue to do so, not because I have some affinity for Piers Morgan, but because I know that a lot of people are watching, and if it means that we can pick off a few people who are otherwise only exposed to right-wing propaganda on a daily basis, then I've done my job. Like, if I can get away with persuading 2 people who watch out of 1 million, and that's 2 more people that we have now that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And so it's just a matter of putting your head down and doing the work on a daily basis over and over and over again. Gates on OAN, would you talk to him? The funny thing about that is I did try to interview Matt Gaetz, and somebody on his staff responded to my email where I requested an interview with him with a bunch of screenshots of tweets that I posted critical of Matt Gaetz. I'm sure you can imagine the breadth of those tweets, and just wrote, "This you?" I was like, well, that's a good way to say no. Guess that interview isn't happening. So needless to say, I did not get a Matt Gaetz interview, and something tells me I'm not going to be contacted by the Matt Gaetz OAN booker anytime soon. I know you said you want to interview different large left-wing political commentators this month to see their point of view, so I wanted to recommend Kyle Kulinski since he's literally declared war on fake right-wing independent media. That's a great idea. I'll absolutely reach out to Kyle Kulinski. I interviewed Mehdi Hassan about a week ago for my YouTube channel. I will be interviewing Jank coming up in about a week or so. I'll be speaking to Chris Cuomo in about a week. Spoke to like any look, I'm willing to talk to anybody, even and look, on one hand, I'll talk to people who I think have great ideas and I think are worth elevating those ideas. And on another hand, I'm going to talk to people who I know that the vast majority won't agree with, but that's part of doing my job, is making my case even to people who I don't agree with. And so, I would just, again, like, people are going to watch that interview. They're going to be, I already know that people are going to see interviews that I do with certain people, and they're going to say, oh, why, like, how could you do that? How could you platform this person? This person's crazy. But like, I'm in the persuasion business. Like, that's my job. My job is to try to reach people, whether they're regular people who come across my videos just because the YouTube algorithm fed it to them, whether it's somebody who watched my stuff on TikTok because the YouTube algorithm fed it to them, whether it's, people who deliberately tune in because you agree with me, which may be the vast majority of people who are watching right now, or media figures who hopefully some of my arguments can persuade a little bit of what they say. But this is the business of persuasion. I'm not just sitting here reading like a teleprompter that says, today, December 10th, here's what happened in the news. Like, that's not my job. Like, I'm here to give my point of view. I try to do it in good faith. I try to do it in a way that's effective. I know that not everybody's going to agree with me, and that's okay. But like, all I can do is just try to have some integrity and give my honest thoughts on everything that's happening. How about going on Rogan? I would do it. I would happily do it. I don't know that Joe Rogan knows that I exist, but I'd happily do it. If I could interview anyone in the entire world, who would it be? That's a great question. I would interview Jon Stewart. If I could interview anybody in the entire world, it would be Jon Stewart. I've reached out to Jon Stewart a lot of times. He is a very difficult person to book an interview with, which is wild because I literally sat in the White House and interviewed the President of the United States. I also would like to interview Trump. I would like to have the opportunity to ask him what NATO stands for. I'd like to ask him the opportunity to say, like, what does the FTC stand for? I'd like to say, like, name 5 countries in South America. I hope one of those interviews happens, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Would I ever consider running for anything? No. I think that I am very committed to building independent progressive media. That is, I think, what there are legislators who are so good at what they do, who are also effective communicators. They're much smarter than me. They can do a much better job than me. Let them do that. We have so few people in left of center media that I think if I have the advantage of having the platform that I've built, the last thing I should do is like give it up just to be one more person in Congress who, by the way, isn't even going to be as effective as other members of Congress because I don't know how to do that. But there are people who are really good at doing it, who have really good messages, and I'd rather promote them and do the what I think is the more important work of bolstering independent progressive media. And by the way, just a quick note: if anybody's watching and you're not following yet, please hit the follow button or the subscribe button, whatever you feel is best for you. But that's the best way to support what I do. Do I think that Democrats will make a comeback in 2026? The answer to that is yes. I get that my credibility on predictions may be in the toilet right now because I earnestly believed with every fiber of my being that Kamala would win this election, as I know many of you did. But there are a few reasons why I think Democrats are going to succeed in 2026. First of all, I think Donald Trump largely benefited from being out of the political zeitgeist for so long, and people have a short attention span, and they forgot the chaos that enveloped the Trump administration when he was in office the first time. And the fact is that people are mostly focused on what's happening right in front of them, and we live in a global high inflation environment that has been absolutely brutal for incumbents across the industrialized world. There hasn't been a single incumbent party in the industrialized world that has either gained seats or kept their own seats outright. And so the U.S. was no different. We weren't spared from that. And so that's why, in large part, Democrats weren't able to succeed in this election. But I think that for Trump, the chaos that he trafficked in his first term is going to come surging back. People are going to remember that. It's not going to be the same environment. We're not going to be focused on inflation that plagued Joe Biden's first term. It's going to be about Donald Trump's chaos that plagued his second term. You also have to remember that history offers some precedent here. Donald Trump came into office with unified control of government in January of 2017. And what happened within 2 years? We have a puppy here. Hello, little baby. Hello, little munchkin. Hello. Donald Trump came into office in 2016, unified control of government, had the House, the Senate, and the White House. And what happened within 2 years? Democrats, again, won the House by the biggest margin in modern American history. Oops, let me figure out how to fix this real quick. And so if we look at history as some precedent here, we see how people react to the chaos of a Trump White House. And we've seen how they've reacted before. And again, that's why I do think that these upcoming races, like the ones in Virginia and in New Jersey and in Wisconsin's Supreme Court race, I think they're going to be really instructive in terms of Democrats being able to flex their muscles and offer a little bit of a preview of what's to come moving forward. For those who don't know, this is Aston. This is where all of my mental health is being propped up by a 13-year-old Chihuahua. That's how precarious my mental health situation is right now. That if anything happened to this dog, my mental health would crumble like a house of cards. So, what's up, Bubba? Luckily, though, I have plans for him to live for 15 more years, so that's what I'm looking forward to. For those who say you better get a second dog, never gonna happen. This is the only child of all only children. What are you doing, bud? Hey, Bubba, sit, Bubba. Good boy. This is the ultimate only child. I think on my new Discord, which by the way, let me see how I'm going to post make sure that my Discord link is at the top of the chat. On my Discord, there's like a thread where people post dog pictures. So very important that everybody do that. What's up, bud? You leaving? Oh, all right. He wants to leave. He's over it. He's over it. There's a lot of cat in this dog. All I want in life is for this dog to love me as much as I love him. That's what I want in this dog. All right, go ahead, buddy. Okay, bud. And that's the end of that. He gives me like 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That's all I get. Okay, let me pin my Discord link. Okay. All right, let's get back to some questions here. We'll do one more question here. By the way, yes, he does look good for 13. I have plans for this dog to live until his 30s. So, and if one day I'm not streaming or not on YouTube for a month, it's because something has happened to that dog. So anyway, okay. All right, this is a good place to leave off. So among all the awful news and appointments, give me a reason to hope. And I think that's a little bit in terms of what I was saying before, is that like we're in a situation right now where we know that Donald Trump was able to slink into office because Americans largely forgot who he was, forgot the chaos that enveloped him. We're focused mostly on high prices and inflation, but there is no way for Donald Trump to escape the chaos that will surround his administration this time, and to even blame it on the Democrats. The silver lining of not being in the majority in either the House, the Senate, or the White House is that Republicans are responsible for everything that happens moving forward. And by the way, their first big plan is to try and launch a trade war with our closest trading partners of Canada and Mexico. So they will be accountable for everything they do. And we already have precedent in terms of how Americans respond to the chaos that envelops the Trump administration. Again, when Donald Trump was elected and took office in January of 2017, by November of 2018, we would usher in the biggest House majority in modern American history. We will do that again here, knowing full well that Donald Trump is going to exercise, like, he's the agenda that he believes he has a mandate to enact is not the agenda that the American people voted him in office to enact. Americans were hurting because of high prices and inflation. His plans to deport millions of people and dreamers and people who keep our economy running is not going to be popular. And I think he will overstep, and I think that we're going to see the results of that play out first in Wisconsin state Supreme Court race, then in New Jersey and Virginia, and then finally in midterms in 2028. So there's a long road ahead. I think that we have a vested interest in being as disciplined and focused as we can. But most importantly, besides the discipline, besides the focus, is that we have to stay engaged, because if we check out, then none of this matters anyway. So look, the people who I'm talking to right now at 7:30 p.m. East Pacific, 10:30 p.m. Eastern are a perfect example of, like, you know, people making sure that we stay in this fight right now at a point where, like, objectively we're at the lowest we've been. I mean, Democrats lost full control of government. And so the fact that you all are here now is what gives me hope moving forward toward midterms here. The fact that people, even at our lowest point, are still taking the time to make sure that y'all stay engaged is what gives me hope moving forward. So I think that is the point that we'll leave it off. So thank you. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Big thumbs down to Kari Lake for missing out on her coveted ambassadorship to Mexico. Better luck next time. Gives her more time to focus on her true passion, which is pretending that she is both the governor and the senator of the state of Arizona. And we'll do another live stream tomorrow. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. Talk to you later. Oh, and by the way, make sure you join the Discord. I don't know if you can just like go on Discord and type in Brian Tyler Cohen and find me that way, or you can go in the chat, and I've pinned it at the top of the chat so you can join the Discord that way. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay, and the last thing we have to do, as you all know, is raid.